Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another episode of Health Discourse with Sakshi and Sushant. So, hi, Sushant. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, today, folks, we will be, as announced yesterday only, that we will be talking about the reliability of blood works. So, let's begin the discussion by sharing a personal experience of mine. So, recently, I went for my blood works at a very good hospital, and it showed that I have a low hemoglobin. I have really bad folate deficiency, and then I have this B12 deficiency. Then I also had this vitamin D levels were very less. So, as advised by the physician whom we were actually consulting, I started taking this folic acid supplement, which had the B12 as well. And then
Mm,
also I was taking DIC, which is, ADEK, DIC, right?
yeah.
Yeah. And I thought it might help me with the absorption of these vitamins, but on the contrary, what it ended up doing was that I sort of gained weight, like 10 kgs of weight. And this was like 4 to 5 months back, if I say that. And when after 1 month I realized that I've been putting on weight, I just stopped these supplements. It's just it was a conscious decision that I made. And when I stopped the supplements, it didn't make much difference. Even when I was taking it, there was no such effect that I'm feeling energetic or there's no fatigue and all those things, because my daily regime is quite active. I have a very active lifestyle, because we do all the home related chores ourselves, and we have this we have a business to run, we have kids to take care of, and all those things. But once I stopped taking the supplements, and I was back to my whole uh, normal regime, where I'm doing my daily bit of my daily practices, and then my daily walk, and I'm doing some 10K steps and all those things. I I sort of lost around 4 kgs of weight in 1 month. Okay. And then I realized that, there is something really, really weird about the blood works, because, as per that the blood works, my hemoglobin was like 8.5. And if it were really that bad, I think I was not supposed to be standing up and doing all sorts of activities that I do on a daily basis, right? So, Sushant, what is your take on this whole case study scenario, that, you
Mm.
know, are actually blood works reliable? Now, I am myself questioning this fact that, blood works are actually not reliable if we see it that way.
Okay.
Because, I
Okay.
also got my test done with our Gene Fithletics Orahit Pro. That
Mm.
was the test. And when I followed that nutrition and everything, I've been feeling quite better, right? So if I were to quote my experience with the nutrition part, there were many inflammatory foods which were in my avoid list. For example, potatoes. I had milk in my avoid. I had that black gram, black lentils,
I
that was
think
in my
sunflower
avoid.
seeds also was in void.
Yes, sunflower seeds was avoid, peanut butter was avoid. So I sort of avoided that for like 3 to 4 months, and after that period, when I reintroduced, there was no inflammation. There were no inflammatory cascades happening. So from what I understood from the whole scenario of these 4 5 months, is that I was undergoing some serious inflammation, which was one of the causes of the weight gain, of course. And well, there were other problems, other symptoms as well, but nutrition was enough to help me out to get rid of these problems. So what is your take on the blood works? Because I sort of sense that blood works didn't really help me out.
Okay. So let me start with this. Probably, Sakshi, I told you when you were going for blood, I told you that it's just waste of time and money, right? And I'm going to support it with data. So since you have mentioned about vitamin B9, B12, I'm going to talk about, because there's a number of biomarkers, so we can't discuss everyone, but I'm going to talk about one biomarker. Before that, I'm going to specify certain things. So blood, what is actually is routine blood test, right? And it has been there for decades, right? Since since I was 25 years, have been going through blood tests, and still people go for blood tests. It's the same thing, same practice. There's no innovation, there's nothing new in that, right? So the point is that, first thing is it's a macro level view of what has happened inside your body for last 3 6 months, right? So it does not tell you why it has happened, what specific factor has caused this particular abnormality. For instance, if you have an high HbA1c level, or you have an dysregulation liver function test, or kidney function test, or probably you have these abnormal deficiencies like vitamin deficiencies, you cannot decode the root cause or what has caused it, right? And I'm going to explain you with homocysteine and a specific heart biomarker, right? That is one aspect. That is what we call as the functional issue, right? So you cannot, it is, you can just try to suppress it or manage it because you want to show it to your healthcare practitioner that I have reduced it either by drugs or by certain fat diets or whatever it is, right? uh, Second thing is the structural issue, right? So how the sample is collected, transported, stored, processed, shaken, stirred, right? All these have an impact on your results. So when you go to two different labs at the same point in time, you will have different results, right? So ideally, you cannot rely on them, and you cannot use them to, you know, incorporate a health modifying outcomes, right? I'm going to be very, very blunt on this. And then now we have these new age health tech startups who are now saying we are adding another layer of variables. This is all bullshit, all waste of money, waste of, there's no innovation. All these variables are have nothing to do with the with your understanding your biology. I'm going to come into that what exactly you should look at and how you should look at, and why there is no innovation, why we are still stuck up in the same dogma of blood works and variables, right? So let me take an example of HRV also. So if you're tracking heart rate variability, right? So there may be fluctuation in your HRV, but it does not tell why you have, right? So there can be multiple factors. It could be your butyrate production, your nitric oxide, your number of other inflammatory factors such as lipopolysaccharides. Number of these can impact your heart rate variability. And tracking on a daily basis does not give you that what is happening inside your cells, right? So that is a basic. Now coming back to a specific uh, biomarker, I'm going to discuss about homocysteine because elevated homocysteine is one of the key biomarker that reflects abnormalities in your heart conditions, right? And again, so when we have homocysteine, what is the solution doctors have? They will tell you to consume maybe vitamin B9, vitamin B12, right? And I'm going to explain you why. So homocysteine is nothing but when your gut microbes actually metabolizes methionine in various foods which are high in methionine into homocysteine. Now, high homocysteine, what it does, it overexpresses an molecule called an enzyme called asymmetric dimethyl arginine, ADMA. And this ADMA suppresses your nitric oxide production. And we have discussed this on a number of times that nitric oxide, this signaling molecule that dilates your blood vessels, that regulates your blood pressure, that prevents plaque deposition in arteries, that prevents platelet aggregation, that prevents heart disease, right? So ideally, high homocysteine reduces your nitric oxide levels, right, which increase your risk for heart disease. Then you know so there are vitamin B12 and vitamin B9 can act as a cofactor to convert homocysteine back into methionine, right? So that is one way. But now again, vitamin B9 and B12 absorption and synthesis relies on your gut microbiome, right? So ideally, if you are taking supplements, and here I'm going to tell you very, very important thing because that is what happened with you. Vitamin B9 is folate, and the supplements you consume is folic acid. There's a difference between the two. So folate is
Folic acid
metabolized.
is, as per a layman understanding, folic acid is a synthetic form of folate, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's not
and
exactly folate, but
Yeah, so take it that way that folic acid cannot be synthesized or cannot be metabolized by your gut microbiome, and it can be actually metabolized by your liver. And the enzymes which are responsible for this bioconversion, right, have very low bioavailability, and therefore a lot of this folic acid is excreted through feces, right? So essentially, it gives folic acid gives no benefit. Similarly, vitamin B12 is actually, as I've shared in my one of the videos also, that your 80%, 50% of the vitamin B12 is metabolized in your small intestine. The balance is actually metabolized by your gut bacteria for their own metabolic functions, while they also synthesize 20% of the 20 to 30% of the B12 vitamin, right? So ideally, if your gut microbiome is imbalanced, right, I'm not talking of identifying a specific bacteria. That is what a lot of these gut microbiome testing companies are doing. They do not understand that it doesn't matter what bacteria you have, matter whether they are actually performing a function or not. And that is what most of the gut microbiome companies miss out, right? So coming on to that, right? So ideally, when you have a gut dysbiosis, it means you have certain bacteria, pathogenic bacteria, which are expressing specific genes that is causing, expressing virulence genes that is causing inflammatory cascade. So probably they will take up a lot of this vitamin B12. You will not have vitamin B12 for that to act as cofactor for, conversion of homocysteine back into methionine, right? So again, these supplements are not going to help, and and vitamin B12 also plays an important role in your lipid metabolism. So it actually has an important role in synthesis of carnitine, which is again which carries fatty acid inside the mitochondria to for their oxidation, so that fatty acids can be used to produce ATP by the mitochondria in specific cells, right? So that is the reason you had vitamin B12. There was disregulated lipid metabolism, and then you end up gaining weight, right? So it impacts your ability to gain weight, right? So this is so ideally, mm, first thing is that you have in high homocysteine levels, or probably that is one of the biomarker for adverse heart conditions, or you may have low nitric oxide production. It can be due to different inflammatory conditions. It can be due to oral microbiome, gut microbiome, your exposure to mold toxicity, your exposure to environmental pollution, your exposure to glyphosate, your exposure to, or you may have oxidative stress, or you may have cellular stress. There will be cellular senescence. There would be high energy resistance within the cells, and probably I'll talk a bit about energy resistance also. So I'm talking of all those laymen who do not understand. I'm not talking of insulin resistance, I'm talking of energy resistance, right? I'm going to talk about that also. So, when you have all these things, until you identify specific factors just by, testing your CRP, which is one of the marker to check inflammation, it does not tell you what has caused inflammation. So how do you address it, right? That is a problem, right? So, yeah. So, that's why I'm telling you there is a structural and functional issues in blood biomarkers. And then, using combining it with your variable is not going to help, because it does not tell you. Variable also is telling you what is happening inside your sensory things and inside your, bloodstream. You cannot get inside your cell and tell what is happening inside the cell, right? So that is the bigger problem, right? So ideally, all these are waste of money. You're using CGM to track your blood sugar level, every 3 months, based on your gut microbiome, oral microbiome functions, your mitochondrial functions. The response to insulin response will change every 3 months. So it means that you have to keep on wearing that CGM every now and then, right? And even if it's showing a food is spiking, is it because why it is spiking? What specific reason it is there? What specific inflammatory cascade is causing it to spike, right? You do
You
not
know,
know that.
uh, Speaking of wearables, my biggest concern is first that whenever you are putting on a device on your body, you are exposing yourself to radiation levels. I mean, whether it is just a headphone or you're wearing a watch, that smartwatch and all those things, and even if that there's a ring or any kind of a gadget or a CGM, there are some kind of radiation levels that part of your skin will be always exposed to. Okay, that is one
And
thing.
and that disrupts your mitochondria. So this that impacts your
Yes.
mitochondria. It causes oxidative stress inside the cells. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Which is why recently there's been a study that, the ear pods these days, which are very, prominently being used, it has a radiation level of microwave. It works on the radiation level of microwave. The frequency is less, it's not that much, but yes, it gives out a radiation level of microwave, which is why many people are going back to the wired headphones. Okay,
Hmm.
that is
Hmm.
about the radiation levels that I'm talking. Now, speaking of longevity, we have seen a lot of clinics cropping up in many urban parts of India. We have many clinics coming up in Bangalore. We have coming clinics coming up in Delhi, Mumbai, and whatnot places. And these are probably the same, working on the same model. The way there are clinics in the US which are working on the
Hmm.
longevity space, right? They're giving us red light therapies. They're giving you MRI scans, they're giving you in-depth blood works. Now, blood works is again a very key factor which is playing a common role in longevity. So, do you really think that you can measure your aging and longevity factors without measuring yourself, only through blood works? I mean, you've mentioned it time and again that you cannot get to the cells through your blood works. Is it possible that can we measure that through blood works?
This is all, bullshit science. This is all pseudoscience. They do not understand human biology, right? And these are promoted by people who think that it is already about calorie counting. It is you should not consume fat because fat has more calories, right? This all, your blood works, as I mentioned, is just a summary of what has happened in the past, right? So again, taking example of HbA1c, right? So if you have an high HbA1c, you may be using CGM and combining blood works to track it, right? But the real reason may not be, that particular food which is showing you a spike, but because your body has lost the ability to produce nitric oxide, so there is no translocation. So the
Hmm.
glucose cannot be transported inside the cells, right? And this may be one of the reason, and then there may be other inflammatory cascades. It may be lipopolysaccharides, it may be TMO, it may be imsyl propionate, it may be protease produced by your gut microbiome, maybe gingipain, a lot of these things, right, which could combine with your lack of inability to translocate glut4 that can bind to cell membrane, bring the glucose inside the cell, right? So essentially that is one of the basic, these they are a combination of these factors, right, which could be making you response, a food response to your insulin level or your blood glucose level, right? So that is all. And you are ending up paying 20,000 rupees on this. One simple session is, you really want to reduce HbA1c, please reduce your carbohydrate intake for 3 months. You will see a reduced HbA1c. And you remember we visited a so-called diabetic clinic in Delhi couple of months back, and they were just too much focused on protein and too much focused on reducing HbA1c. So you don't need to spend that much
So
money.
I think they're sticking to this a very primitive kind of a science. I don't know, but this is very difficult to convince somebody that you don't need to have too much of protein. You don't need to become obsessed with protein. You don't
So
need to lower
no,
down
so
your
so
carbs. I
let
mean,
let me let me tell you here. So first thing is, let's not get into too much because that's not a point of discussion for this call, right? But the simple thing is that protein has to be, amino acids have to be personalized, right?
yeah.
And you have to think that how that specific amino acid is interacting with your microbiome, with your biology, right, with your oral microbiome, with your gut microbiome, with your mitochondria, right? And that is what is important, everything. So food again is a sack of more than 100,000 molecules, and that's what our system looks at, right? At gene freakletics, we look at how each of the molecule interacts with each of the gut microbiome, oral microbiome, our cells, right? Enzymatic
Yes.
functions, right?
Yes.
So we look at all those things, right? So coming back to your point on longevity and aging, right? I'm going
Mm,
to
mm,
be very brief. I don't want to get too much technical. I'll keep it very, very simple in laymanish language, right? So we humans have not been evolved to age and die, right? So we humans have a regenerative capacity, a cells regeneration capacity, tissue organ regeneration capacity. For instance, liver. If you have a liver injury, probably your liver regenerates in some time,
it
right?
regrows. It
Right,
regrows. Most
and
of the
it
time, it
goes
yeah.
it goes to the human evolution, right? So
Mm,
1.5 billion years ago, that before that there was unicellular organism, they were single cell, they were just, they were oxygen less, they didn't have the ability to use oxygen to generate ATP, so they were fermenting whatever fuels they had, and the singular objective was to grow and hunt for foods, right? And
yeah.
then 1.5 billion ago, there was some bacteria which came, and there are different theories. So I'm going to talk of one specific theory. There's an endosymbiotic relationship to these bacteria. The small cells got into the bigger cells, and then they instead of, they formed a partnership, and they decided that, now this small cell have an ability to use oxygen to generate energy, to generate ATP,
Mm,
right? So
mm,
so we transited from a unicellular to a multicellular organism. Now we started using oxygen to generate energy. That's a typical way. Our plants, actually use release carbon dioxide when they produce through the process of photosynthesis, right? And again, we use oxygen and all that, right? So essentially, let's
mm,
not get into that discussion, right? But the point is that, by a process of photosynthesis, there are carbon on the foods which we consume from the plants, what we eat, right? And
mm,
these carbon single and double carbon bonds are broken down, right, inside the cell. And then, these small cells, what we is now called as mitochondria, which is a remnant of the ancient bacteria, right? So
mm,
these mitochondria, what they do is, so there is a flow of electrons. So when the carbon is coming, there is a supply of electrons from the food, right? And then there's a flow of electrons which flows through the electron transport chain, right? so
mm,
so again, at every stage there is a resistance called energy resistance, which facilitate
mm,
the energy transformation process, right? So you
mm,
get ATP, and then, all cells actually work are bound in a social contract. So they are social, they have social, they work together, they work
mm,
as a collective, right?
mm,
So, and their major the long term goal is to take care of this organ, this body, these different organs, so that your body does not, degrade and you do not die, right? That's a typical process of how do we make sure that our body is actually growing, and there's repair and maintenance, and there are growth factors and number of these things, right? So
mm,
so ideally, what is happening is that these cells work in collective, and they work in collective. Every cell communicate with other cells, via bioelectric signals. So they are bioelectric fields, and then they remember that, that there is a particular pattern memory that tells that, okay, I have what should be the say shape, size, structure of my fingers, my eyes, organ regeneration, number of these things, right? And again, your mitochondria actually uses this bioelectric network. So all the bioelectric signals of all the cells taken together forms a bioelectric network, and your
mm,
mitochondria uses this bioelectric network. So they have receptors, they process all the information which they are getting from the external environment, right? And
mm,
then they integrate them, and then they transmit signals through these bioelectric network, telling your nucleus to express certain genes, code for specific proteins, communicating with cells, right? Making hormones, disrupting hormones, if you have a high blood sugar level, if you have a high blood pressure, if you have all these blood biomarkers, this is maybe homocysteine or all those things. It is because of these signaling communications. So cytokines, which are called pro-inflammatory molecules, is just a mode of how cells communicate with each other, right? So even
mm,
even the cortisol is produced. So cortisol gives a signal to your cells, to your other cells, that this attack is going on. So they start preserving energy, right? Or maybe if you have inflammation, so mitochondria of your immune cells tells to start producing cytokines, right? So that they can, go to the injured side and do the repair work, right? That's a normal process. So coming into aging, you have to understand what is happening inside the cell, how cells are communicating, what they are
mm,
communicating, right? What signals mitochondria is secreting, right? How
mm,
the electrons is flowing through electron transport chain, right? So if there's high energy resistance, it would lead to production of reactive oxygen species, which could damage your mitochondria, which could damage your cells, which could damage your DNA. And that is the same thing which happens in cancer also, right? So essentially, cancer is nothing but one cell decide there's a change alter in your bioelectric signal, and one cell decide that I don't want to be part of this collective, and I want
mm,
to, work individually toward my individual goals so that I can grow. And then
mm, mm,
then they start growing, and then they start proliferating, and they cell differentiation, and they start to
mm,
dominate the entire your body. And that's what cancer is, right? So it's
mm,
cell growth out of control. Why it is? Because they
mm,
decide that I'm going to now grow indefinitely, and then they
mm,
use mitochondria to actually uh, you know for their own synthesis growth. They resort to the fermentation pathway, which was there when we were uh, when we were unicellular organisms, right? So
mm,
what I mean
mm,
was animals, the humans, mammals, right? All those, right? So ideally, if you have to understand the longevity, aging, why you are
mm,
aging, you have to understand your cells, your cellular
mm,
functions, your cell
mm,
communications, your mitochondria, what signals they're transmitting. So essentially, mitochondria is like a computer. So it's an information processing unit. It grabs all the
mm,
information from the environment and then integrate it, and then use that to send signals to different. So it can send signal to your nucleus, to your cytoplasm, to your lipid droplets, and then these nucleus can express certain specific proteins that could trigger production of cytokines that can travel to other cells, and they can bind to receptors of other cells, and then as other cells sense it, and then they start doing something, right? So ideally, this is how our body works, right? So if you really want to understand your biology, blood works is just one way, of just telling
I
some.
feel it is like blood works is more of scratching the surface. You're not getting anything. You're not getting an in-depth insight that why is it happening.
That is
We
one
just
thing,
get to know that
Sakshi.
something is happening.
That
Yes.
is one thing. Other thing is the variability on the results, right?
Mm,
So there is a more than 30% variability in the results, right? Because
mm,
of the non-medical factors, right? You know, collecting samples,
mm,
storing sample, transporting samples, processing samples, right? All
mm,
these have a results on you. And again, there's this high variability. You cannot derive the right outcomes after this high variability, right? And again,
mm.
even if lab is saying that we are NABL accredited, right? It does not mean that results are NABL accredited. The process is accredited, right?
The
And the
process of handling the samples and how it
process of
is
how it is
yeah,
being processed, right?
being processed.
In
Yeah.
the machine, right? So again,
Yeah.
again, how it is non-medical factors, how it is collected, process, transported, stored, all these have an impact, right?
Mm.
So this is what I've shared is a structural issue. Then we have a functional issue. We can't derive actionable outcome even if you're merging with you're marrying it with your variables. It is not going to help, right? If you're
Now,
tracking
now,
it.
now, I think speaking of science, let's move to
Mhm.
a very interesting factor. Now, these
Mhm.
days we have seen that there are people, I mean, companies who are combining the DNA test with the blood works. I mean,
Hmm.
they're
Hmm.
combining both of these
Hmm.
things.
Hmm. Hmm.
Some people are trying to do merge the microbiome plus DNA plus blood works. I mean, this is
Hmm.
like a cocktail of lot of tests, and what happens in the end, and as we have experienced, that a patient gets confused and
So so
they,
let
they they
let
don't understand what is happening.
so it is like a normal jargon would be they are traveling in multiple boats at one time and they're going to fall in the river, right? So
Yeah,
so let us understand this because since only 10 minutes are remaining, right? So please understand this. Your DNA, your protein, your genes are hardware.
yeah.
They cannot do anything on its own, right?
Mm,
Your expression of genes is modulated by these bioelectric fields inside the cells, ion channels, gap junctions, and all those things. And your mitochondria communicates. As I mentioned, it processes the information and sends signals to nucleus to turn on or turn off specific genes that code for specific proteins that trigger various communications, right? So the idea is that, focusing on DNA is static, it will not change. And there's hardware. So you can program the hardware based on how your software is operating, right? So every disease is just an alteration in your bioelectric fields, right? And you can modulate that bioelectric signals, right? You can just modulate them, right? By understanding your mitochondrial functions, your cellular functions, right? So this is all this, and gut microbiome also, they're just identifying bacteria does not help, right? So you have to understand this. Yeah.
I think that you've made a really interesting point that, you cannot change the hardware. It is the way it is. I mean, you cannot change your genes.
And
I mean, there are
another thing I'll add here.
now,
Sorry to
now,
interrupt.
now, now, let me tell you something. People are trying to use the CRISPR gene editing technology to change your hardware and all those things, but we don't know what it does in the long run. If those changes are actually tangible in nature, if they are, I mean, they are actually not causing any side effects, or they're not breaking down your whole hardware when you're doing the gene editing part. There are scientists who are doing you are messing up with the hardware part. But yes, we can control the software part in us, which is the expression
Yeah,
of genes, right?
so expression of genes again is determined by specific signals, which is communicated through bioelectric signals. And again, these bioelectric signals are pattern memories which every cell remember, right? Which again determines. So your genes does not cannot tell you what should be shape of your finger, or whether finger should be in your hand or your head, right? Or you should
Hmm.
have hand, below, and you should have legs above. All these things that your genes doesn't tell. These are the pattern memories, that how your where your head should be, how you can regenerate your organs like liver, right? All these are the pattern memories, what we call is morphogenetic memories, right? Which is
Hmm.
again, which is stored in this bioelectric network. So all these cells work together. They have to work together. There is a cell collective, and the mitochondria controls everything, right? So if
Hmm.
someone is gaining weight, it is like literally your mitochondria telling is that you didn't do what I wanted. Now, grab some more food, have cravings, or have high blood sugar level, right? That's a normal way. So ideally, it's all hardware. Even having a bacteria identifying you have an Physiobacterium nucleatum in your mouth, right? Or P. gingivalis in your mouth, or your E. coli in your gut, it does not mean anything until you can decode the instruction these bacteria is getting to express certain genes. And these instructions are based on the molecules in the food you consume, how these microbiome is interacting with these molecules. They produce certain pro-inflammatory molecules that your mitochondria can sense, and then they produce cytokines. They trigger production of cytokines, and these cytokines communicate with other cells, which directly impact your hormone production, your estrogen, your testosterone, cortisol, thyroid, number of these things, right? So ideally,
Yeah.
if you have to promote longevity and prevent disease such as cancer and metabolic disease such as cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes, please fix these electromagnetic field, these cellular functions, this mitochondria, right? Mitochondria is, please remember, mitochondria is the one of many function is producing ATP, but we assume that that's the
Hmm.
only function. Mitochondria
Hmm.
is an information processing unit. It performs, it controls everything inside your cells, right? So
Yes.
you have to
Yes.
understand this. And again, just before, for cancer we'll discuss later, but just to tell, cancer is not about genetic mutations. It is about a cell decides that I don't want to be part of this ecosystem, and I want to grow on my own, right? And again,
More of,
so
you can say metaphorically, they're more of the rebellious cells which want to go out of the ecosystem and build their own
selfish
ecosystem.
objectives, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then if you rewire or remodel their bioelectric signaling so that they come back and be part of that, right? So that is going to help you overcome cancer, right? And that is what we are doing
Mm.
in Gene Free Clinic. So it's very complex and it's not easy to comprehend. It's not easy to understand. Your health, your body is not easy to understand. So if
Yeah.
someone is
So
interested
I
in
think,
knowing more about this bioelectric signaling and bioelectric network, they can talk to us personally. We'll be happy to share more insights about it.
sure. So this was a very interesting discussion today on longevity and all the blood works. So I hope our listeners might have got some good insights out of these this whole discussion. And folks, we will be back with another episode soon. Thank you for supporting us time and again. We have a good number of subscribers on YouTube. I'd like to thank all of them. We have some great listeners on our Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Amazon Music. So we are literally doing this for educating all of the people that, why is it important for you to understand what is going on inside your body, because it plays a major role in managing your health, and in the long run you can actually biohack yourselves. You don't need to be dependent on anything which is more of a pill or a supplement, right, Sushant?
Yeah, yeah. So supplements can be one of the ways to do it, right? But again, you have to be very
Yeah,
precise what you need, why you need, what specific pathway it is going to impact, right? How much you need,
yeah,
and and till when you have to consume it, then you have to, maybe resort to some other interventions, right? So yeah.
yeah. So thank you, Sushant, for this amazing discussion. We will be back with another episode soon. Thank you.
Thank you.